mistake. We should be taking them downtown, separating them.
Commander's call. Where are you going?
I woke up and my father said JonBenet was missing.
In the Lifetime dramatization, that bald figure you see is supposed to be Detective Fred Patterson. Now, where were we in terms of the timeline?
Mr. Ramsey, you can't walk away from an active crime scene.
They're getting my plane ready. I have important business in Atlanta.
Your daughter? We have unfinished business here. You can't go to Atlanta or anywhere else.
I can't stay here another month.
We obviously have to talk to you, your wife, and your son. You'll stay with us.
Now, the expression Lifetime movie bad isn't something that is accidental. And here you see an example of that, because what have they done? They've conflated two characters, Larry Mason and Detective Fred Patterson. Unless it was Fred Patterson who witnessed this as well, which I doubt. The other woman who's present there apparently is Linda Arndt. But was she actually present when John made that call? Well, that's unknown. In this analysis, we want to deal with the period just after the Ramseys leave their home. It's this moment here, dramatized in the movie version, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town.
Spend some time with Berg. Talk to him.
Let me hear my Johnny babe. Daddy! Daddy, are you all right?
Something awful's just happened, son.
Boulder police officer Fred Patterson was one of the first detectives on the scene.
It was a very rapid response once I knew what we were going to.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Now, according to Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, after the family left the house, Detective Michael Everett, that's yet another detective, designated the lead crime scene investigator, and Larry Mason started to prepare a search warrant. That's pretty fast work, wouldn't you say? By 1:50, the house was secured. 40 minutes later, Detective Arndt went to see the Ramseys at the Fernie's house, while Detective Patterson went to the White's house to speak with JonBenet's 9-year-old brother Burke, and we've just seen little snippets of that dramatization from the Lifetime movie. Patterson confirmed what he had been told earlier, that the boy had slept through the events of the previous night. Whoa, hold on, not so fast. Let me just ask a simple question here. How well do you know the Ramsey case? Could you say before today who interviewed Burke first? Did you know that it was Fred Patterson? And this is the report that emerged out of that interaction. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button and let's get started.
There were no signs of a struggle in the house. There was no signs of forced entry. There were no footprints outside the house.
Well, we were at a Christmas party. We must have gotten home about 9:30, and...
Now that dramatization, which is from Getting Away with Murder, it came out in the year 2000. There's a couple of errors as well. You would say those clearly large glass fragments would be potential signs of a struggle, and there were no big glass fragments in this particular story. There were very small pieces. And then you also have the officer potentially observing Patsy with her hands on her face. Now, what quite a few of these documentaries miss is the presence of the FBI agent Ron Walker. So it's a mixed bag. Some of what they dramatize is true and some of it is partially true. Some of it is also a distortion.
I'll call you back. Just give us a day. Please. We've just lost our daughter.
But let's go back to that report from Detective Patterson. Now, although it's authored by Detective Linda Arndt and contained within her report, it's nevertheless quoting what Detective Patterson observed at the time. And so Arndt writes the following: I obtained the following information from the General Detective briefing held on the late afternoon of December 26th. Here it is. Detective Patterson had conducted an interview with Burke Ramsey. Burke Ramsey said he and 3 other members of his family had attended a party held at the, and that should be White's residence, on December 25th, 1996. The Ramseys were at the dinner party from about 4:30 until 9 to 9:30. Crab was served at this dinner. John and Patsy Ramsey disciplined each of their children by talking to them. John and Patsy Ramsey do not use any corporal punishment on their children. Burke said there'd be no family arguments prior to nor on December 25th.
That's not entirely accurate.
No family arguments prior to nor on December 25th. There were at least 2, possibly 3, involving JonBenet. The most important was a disagreement JonBenet and Patsy had just before heading to the Whites. Do you remember what it was? Patsy wanted JonBenet and herself to wear matching outfits. It was an artifact of the pageant circuit, where some themes required mothers and daughters to dress in matching outfits. Do you remember we dealt with that previously? But JonBenet was in no mood for pageants on Christmas night. By the way, this isn't a theory or hearsay. Patsy herself admitted to this in their first interview with the police. These are Patsy's words. Well, she wore this little outfit that I'd gotten her at the Gap. We had a little riff. That's Patsy's term for a little disagreement over that, because I wanted her to wear, I was wearing a red sweater and I wanted her to wear this red sweater with a black velvet pant, because I was wearing black velvet pants and it was Christmas and all that. Trujillo, Patsy. And she didn't want to wear the red shirt just because I was wearing it. She wanted to wear the shirt that went with the outfit, which was a Gap outfit that I'd bought her when we went shopping for her. And it was a little white kind of neck like this, kind of a Trujillo, kind of a crew neck, Patsy. Crew neck, and it had a little rhinestone, little kind of sequin kind of star thing on it. Trujillo, okay. Patsy. So I just left that on her. And it's also mentioned in their book. This tiff was really one of the very last interactions Patsy had with her daughter before her death. This is from The Death of Innocence. When I returned home in the afternoon, JonBenet and Burke were playing outside with the neighborhood gang. Soon Patsy called for the kids to come in to clean up a little before the party. She, meaning Patsy, wanted JonBenet to wear a red turtleneck with her black velvet pants so that mother and daughter would be dressed alike. But JonBenet wanted to wear the complete outfit she'd chosen. Finally, Mom gave in. JonBenet put on her outfit with her black boots, which zipped up the front and had a bit of an animal print trim along the top. JonBenet loved to dress up. Burke could care less. So, was Burke lying when he said there weren't any family arguments? Well, not necessarily. He may not have been aware of this tiff, or he may have not regarded it as serious enough to even qualify as an argument. But it was serious enough for it to be brought up months later in Patsy's police interview. Remember, Burke was asked whether there was an argument literally the next day, right? So it was on the 26th at about 2 p.m. that Burke was asked about this. So there's little chance that he didn't remember it. For the second incident, we've got to go to Christmas Eve, and it also involves what JonBenet was wearing. In this case, Patsy didn't want JonBenet to hike up to the Christmas star. By the way, that's something I've done at night, and it's actually quite a difficult climb. But Patsy was worried that JonBenet might ruin her dress. And I think what happened that particular night was that Burke did actually go up and scramble to the star. But this is from that interview. Patsy. And then we drove around town looking at Christmas lights, and we drove up to the star up on the mountain there. And I remember JonBenet was miffed because we wouldn't let her get out, and she wanted to walk up into the star. Trujillo, Patsy. And she just had her little velvet Sunday school shoes on, so she said, well, what's the use coming up here if you can't even go up to the star? So then we came down from the Star, and we wound around by the White House, and I think we went up in there for a few minutes, and then we went home. Well, that's 2. The third incident is unclear. We just know Little Miss Christmas was in tears at the Christmas party at the Ramsey home on December 23rd. That's actually how Detective Steve Thomas opens his book, JonBenet, Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation, with this particular scene of Little Miss Christmas in tears. And she was apparently the only one who was. Was this due to an argument? If so, an argument with whom? Maybe it wasn't. It's unknown what was really happening here. But did this have something to do with the 911 call that was made that same day? Again, it's unclear, but the official story suggests otherwise. There is also potentially a 4th incident, this one involving John. In this one, JonBenet was riding her brand new bicycle in the back alley, and John told her to stop and to get ready for the party. Was that an argument? Probably not. But literally all 4 of these incidents paint the same portrait of a child either crying or not happy about something. And when we look at the final photo of JonBenet, she doesn't look terribly happy, does she? Now, before we move on, I want to make one additional observation about Detective Fred Patterson's statement. It's the inclusion of a very specific detail, what they ate at the White's Christmas party. Crab. Now, what's interesting is in the Lifetime dramatization, I don't think this is even brought up. I don't think that word is even mentioned. And often storytellers don't know what to leave in, don't know what is important. Now, it's interesting that Burke could bring this up, could volunteer this, and that this was apparently so well known, that the Ramsey kids like crab, while the Whites ended up specially including it in their menu. Bonita Sauer also highlights this in her narrative. Let's have a look at that. The Ramsey family arrived at the White residence at about 4:30 p.m. With a household of relatives and guests, tables were set up in both the living room and dining room in order to provide everyone with a seat. Seafood, including crab, a favorite of the Ramsey children according to Patsy, was one of the main courses served for the holiday meal. Now, we also find Patsy is the source, certainly in this account, that crab was JonBenet's favorite, apparently Burke's as well. Yet when asked about the pineapple, remember, Patsy was vague and unspecific. Now, if JonBenet had eaten crab just before she was killed, and a plate was found in the kitchen with crab, I wonder if Patsy would have said, JonBenet liked seafood in general. Anyway, now let's deal with Lifetime's dramatization.
I woke up and my father said JonBenet was missing.
You know about what time it was you woke up? Didn't hear anything before that in the night? No arguing? Anything like that?
When the character playing Patterson asks Burke whether he heard any raised voices, Burke shakes his head. Burke would later say on Dr. Phil that he didn't hear Patsy calling 911 even though he was awake, and even though the operator said she thought she heard 3 voices after Patsy hurriedly hung up, possibly miscradling the phone. And you may remember from the 911 call that Patsy sounds like she's speaking quite loudly when she says, hurry, 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 hurry. Is it really possible? Is it really probable that Burke didn't hear that? The other thing that I think is quite interesting is that in their book, Patsy says that she cried out to John from downstairs when she found the ransom note. And was that, she's calling to John and he's a floor above Burke's bedroom. Is it really likely that Burke wouldn't have heard that? And in the commotion of looking for JonBenet, is it likely that he wouldn't get up and join in the search, or either ask, what is going on here?
It seems really odd to me that you're 9 years old and your mother comes in the room in seemingly the middle of the night because it's dark and says, where's my baby, where's my baby? And then runs out of the room and you just lay there.
At the time this interview came out, CBS News observed Ramsey, that's Burke, maintains that he stayed in his bedroom while his mother and police frantically searched the house for JonBenet. He also admitted to being out of bed late the night his sister died. Now, if this is true, this would be an instance where his folks thought he was asleep and said he was asleep, but possibly wasn't, maybe even a second instance. But interestingly, if his voice was downstairs by the phone, then wouldn't that count as an argument? Have a look at this excerpt from People magazine. Burke didn't leave his room because he liked to avoid conflict. Burke infamously didn't leave his room the morning of JonBenet's death on December 26, 1996, even as family, friends, and police traipsed around the spacious Boulder, Colorado home. Asked why he wasn't curious, he said, "I guess I kind of like to avoid conflict, or I don't know, I guess I just felt safer there. I'm not the worried type," Burke explained, chuckling. "I guess part of me doesn't want to know what is going on." Now, none of this really came out of Patterson's interview with Burke Ramsey. It actually seems like Patterson didn't really achieve much in his conversation. Now, interestingly, when asked why he'd stay in his room, Burke said because he liked to avoid conflict. But that suggests A, that there was a conflict, and B, that Burke knew there was a conflict because he knew to avoid it. But I thought he said there were no arguments. Well, let's be clear, no matter what really happened, when JonBenet turned up missing, there was a conflict. I mean, you can't say there was peace and calm in the house. But to be fair, in the terms that have been raised, does this qualify as an argument? Well, probably not. We also know from Agent Ron Walker that the Ramseys didn't appear affectionate to one another at the crime scene, and Larry Mason even thought one of the parents appeared a little callous to him, but he decided to reserve judgment. What I'm getting at here is that, is there a possibility that there were arguments, and if there were, would Burke communicate that?
My father woke me and said JonBenet was missing and they couldn't find her.
Your father woke you? Oh. I thought you said...
Do you know if we're still good?
Now, my impression of this dramatization seems to suggest that Patterson was more circumspect and critical than I think he actually was. It also suggests that Burke's demeanor at the table was a little off. At the very least, Burke didn't seem to ask about his sister or show concern for her. And I seem to remember Fleet saying something similar when he drove Burke to his home, but I could be wrong.
What do you do up a mission?
We get a skate on the lake and build really big fires.
Sounds fun. Let's get back to you waking up.
Can I go play video games?
Now, the other part of Detective Arndt's report quoting Patterson is actually also quite interesting. Detective Idler, that's yet another detective, talked with a house guest who was staying at the Whites' home. The house guest told Detective Idler that John and Patsy Ramsey treat each of their children fairly. One of the house guests did say that Patsy adored JonBenet. Now, would you say that Patsy adored Burke? The fact is, what is emphasized here is that Patsy adored JonBenet. Now, Detective Idler was told that an adult daughter of John Ramsey's from a previous marriage had been killed in a car accident about 5 years ago. Detective Idler had also been told that Patsy Ramsey had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Patsy had recovered from cancer about 2 years ago. Detective Idler was told that John and Patsy had held a Christmas party at their home on December 23rd. Extra caterers had been hired to assist with this party. You kind of get the feeling that a lot of this information, very important background, but they didn't really know what to do with it. They didn't really know what to think about it. But let's get back to Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. At dusk, the Ramseys had their son Burke picked up from the White's house. This was after Patterson had spoken to him. And Burke was brought to the Fernie's place in the Shanahan Ridge development on Table Mesa, below the foothills. There was room for all of them to stay overnight. The victim advocates who had gone with them to the Fernies left at 5 p.m. Shortly afterwards, Detective Arndt left too. One patrol officer was left behind for security. Michael Bynum, John Ramsey's close friend and corporate attorney, who had been away snowshoeing, now arrived at the Fernie's house. As he walked in, the family was kneeling in the living room praying with the Reverend. At around 7 p.m., John Ramsey went for a walk with John Fernie and Dr. Francesco Buff, JonBenet's physician, who had brought over some medication for Patsy. When they returned half an hour later, Ramsey asked Bynum to represent him. Now, what I think is interesting with that particular description is that if you think about all the friends being present, in the kidnapping phase, which made it difficult for Detective Arndt to control the situation. Well, you had a mirror image of that in the aftermath, where although you have detectives present, you have all these other people kind of present as well, sort of interfering with the situation. You've got the Reverend present, you've got John's brother present, you've got a lawyer present, you've got the Fernies probably present as well. And then you've also got the physician who's basically making it effectively impossible to talk to Patsy. Now, we haven't dealt especially much with Detective Fred Patterson here, though I dare say this was his greatest contribution to the case, this interview. But what would you say about it? It seems to me that it was neither here nor there, really, in terms of Burke. But what happened after that, he does make kind of an interesting contribution, because he goes from there to interview the housekeeper, and we'll be dealing with that in the next episode. Patterson would later emerge arguably as a Ramsey apologist to make precisely this point, that nothing he observed with regards to Burke meant anything to him. Was he right? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.